you're about to listen to is what we like to call a legacy episode. In 2016 and 2017, I embarked on a very special project, the Holistic Fertility and Wellness Podcast. I had the pleasure of interviewing experts and friends from around the world, as well as recording some of my own thoughts in solo episodes. These re-released legacy episodes are just a few of my favorite from that time. Although some of my thoughts and ideas have changed since that time, I think much of what you'll hear is still quite valuable. New episodes of Motherhood in America will be available soon, so keep an eye out. But for now, enjoy this special legacy episode. This podcast is for informational purposes only and not meant to provide medical or mental health advice and does not replace personalized care by your provider. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're here. And Lisa, you're my first interview with a fellow podcaster. How does it feel to be on the other side?
A little bit weird, but it's good. I'm used to being around a microphone, so.
Yeah, that I'm sure makes it nice. So I've been listening to your show, and it has been really fantastic. Your interviews go so in depth and provide quite an education. And so I just first want to thank you for providing that kind of education for women out there.
Thank you so much. That's really sweet of you to say. It's obviously a passion of mine, and I just got to a point where I felt that I felt compelled to share it because, as you know, it really makes a huge difference learning about how your fertility works.
It sure does. And for listeners who have been listening to the few episodes I've had, they will have heard me mention that the fertility awareness method really changed everything for me and changed the trajectory of my fertility journey and understanding my overall health. And so that's another reason that I'm so glad to have you here, because you focus so much on that in your both personal and professional life. It's really such a cool thing that this information is available, and such a disservice, I think, that it's not more readily available to everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I haven't come across a woman who has learned about the fertility awareness method who doesn't say, I wish I would have learned this in junior high school. I can't believe that we were never taught this. It should be taught in every school, because really, I think it's our birthright to just have this most basic information, and it is life-changing. So I'm sure we'll delve into the fertility awareness method more as the interview goes on.
Right, absolutely. So could you just start by telling us what brought you down this path of becoming an expert in the fertility awareness method?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of the weird one in the group in the sense that when I was maybe 15 or 16, I had really heavy, painful periods to the point that it was kind of interfering with my sports and things like that in high school. So my doctor, within seconds of me saying those words, painful, heavy periods, put me right on hormonal contraceptives. So I actually didn't use hormonal contraceptives for birth control ever, but I was on them while I was in high school. And because I wasn't using it for protection, for birth control, I used to just take them whenever and, that kind of thing. So
right.
That's why I kind of feel like I'm the weird one of the group. So I never would have felt confident using the pill because I just never took it at the right time, and I would have always just been stressed. And I also, because I had issues with my period, I also knew that those issues would still be there, because every time I had taken a break from the pill, like the period pain would come back with a vengeance. So I always knew I wanted kids at some point in my life, and I was always kind of nervous, like, am I going to have an issue, because it doesn't seem right for me to have all this period pain. So ironically, when I actually did need birth control, I went off the pill and tried to find something else. And I was so fortunate to find fertility awareness. I went to university in Edmonton, and I the Justice HealthWorks organization is located in Edmonton, and I just kind of fell into it. There was a group of women that was teaching that would hold monthly sessions. It's still around, so you can look up the Fertility Awareness Charting Circle in Edmonton. So they're still there.
All right.
And I just started attending, and then over the years I ended up teaching as well, and then a group of us took a course together with Justice, and so that's how I started on my path. It was like the attendee that just never left. I just kept coming.
I love that. That's so cool. Now, I know that this can be such an in-depth, complicated subject to understand, but can you just give us a basic idea of what the fertility awareness method is, and we can talk a little bit about the details after that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, basically, most women were taught, myself included, and Stephanie, you'll have to tell me if you were taught the same thing, that we're fertile every single day. So I remember sitting in like sex ed class, and they told us that you could get pregnant on any day of your cycle, your period, and every other day. So essentially, the fertility awareness method teaches you that there's only a small window of fertility in your menstrual cycle. So you're actually not fertile every day. So what that means is it's impossible for you to get pregnant except for a short window. So approximately 6 to 7 days in a healthy cycle. And the rest of the time, you are actually completely incapable of getting pregnant. Like there's no egg, the sperm die, and that's it.
Right.
So that's the shortest summary in a nutshell. Well, and I'll just add to that when you learn to identify that window of fertility, then you can use that information however you want. So you can use that information to optimize your chances of getting pregnant, and you can also use that information along with some, that's where the detailed information comes in with the rules and things like that. But you can use that information to be able to use it as birth control.
Right. Yeah, I was taught the same thing, and I think that they do that because the teachers don't know all the details, and they're just trying to get kids not to have sex. I really think that's what it is. So, hey,
definitely not to get pregnant if you do get sex.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to be like so careful because it could happen at any time. And so yeah, I was taught that same thing. And then when I discovered, it was Tony Weschler's book, Taking Charge of Your Fertility, and once I discovered that and read that, I was just like, how was I not told about all this before? This is unbelievable. And there's so much information that is just glossed right over that's nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So can you tell us then a little bit about how one might know when a fertile time is coming?
Well, absolutely. So basically, when we talk about the menstrual cycle, the first day of your menstrual cycle is actually the first day of your period. And if you're listening and you happen to be on the pill, you won't notice these changes. So in order to actually see this regular cyclical changes, you actually have to not be on any type of hormonal contraceptive. But what happens is in a healthy cycle, you'll have your menstruation, which will last for, maybe 4 to 5 days or so. And then you'll have a few days after menstruation that we call dry days. So days that you don't observe any cervical mucus, any cervical fluid, same thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really interesting because I've talked about this a lot on my podcast as well, but a lot of women have noticed cervical fluid, but they didn't know it was cervical fluid because we were never told that it was a thing. So we just didn't know what it was. So a lot of women will actually say, like, I kept going to the doctor because I had this like wet discharge and I didn't know what it was. Yeah. And the doctor tested me and it came up negative, and it turns out that, and some women go to the doctor every month because they think they have a yeast infection or something, but it's just their cervical mucus.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I am so glad to hear I'm not the only one that happened to.
Oh my goodness, that happened to you as well.
I have the same story, yes. So I thought something was wrong with me. I was like 18, 19. I thought something was wrong. I went to the doctor. I told him about it, and he's like, oh, I'm going to have to refer you out. I have to go seeing this other person, telling them again, I've got this sort of gooey discharge. It's only there a couple days out of the month. I don't understand it. And she does all these tests and whatnot, and then same thing, comes up negative. And I remember just feeling so confused for years until I got educated.
Well, and isn't it special that the doctor was also in the dark?
Right.
And this is the problem, right? Because the doctor's also in the dark. Like, the doctor doesn't know either that it's a normal part of the menstrual cycle. So back to the menstrual cycle. Yeah. So we have your period, and then you have some dry days, and then you would start your fertile window. So in a healthy cycle, then you'd start to see cervical fluid. And so it might start looking like lotion, kind of pasty. On your underwear, you might notice it, and then it might change to more stretchy, and so it can get to the point that it's like egg whites, or some women don't necessarily. And let me just, egg whites meaning if you picked it up or something, you could stretch it between your fingers and it would stretch pretty long. Mm-hmm. And also, some women don't experience the egg white stretchy stuff. They actually just experience wet, like a sensation of wetness. And that's something, if you've ever gone to the bathroom and you wipe and your tissue like slips and you're like right to the back of the toilet, right. That's the cervical fluid. So basically, with regards to the fertility awareness method, cervical fluid is essential. It's the central part of it. And when you have cervical fluid, in the simplest way to explain it, that's when you're fertile. So that when you have your cervical fluid, that's an indication that you're close to ovulation. And it's the cervical fluid that actually keeps the sperm alive up to 5 days. We've all heard that sperm can live in your body up to 5 days, but that's only when you have mucus.
Right.
Because mucus nourishes it, it feeds it, it helps it to swim, it gives it energy. So it's really, it filters out the bad ones. Like, cervical fluid is amazing and it does a ton of stuff. So then after you ovulate, the cervical mucus actually dries up, and then the rest of the cycle would be dry. So that's a healthy cycle. And on those days that you're dry, because there's no cervical mucus, the sperm actually die. Okay.
Yeah, so it's so cool to hear how our bodies work together to make cool things happen. And obviously there's so much that can go wrong in that process, which is one of the reasons we're talking about this today. But just to hear how all of that is supposed to work together, and when everybody's healthy, then it does. That's just really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and another important aspect of fertility awareness, I think when people first find it, a ton of women find fertility awareness through Tony Weschler's book and Katie Singer's book, and they're amazing books. And once you first start, it's usually for a purpose, like I'm trying to get pregnant or I'm not trying to get pregnant, right. One or the other. But the interesting thing then is that when you read the book, it shows you this perfect chart. And most women have been on hormonal contraceptives at some point or another. And when you go off of hormonal contraceptives, it takes your menstrual cycles a while for them to get healthy again. So when you're looking for these parameters that I just described, menstrual cycle, dry days, cervical mucus, dry days, you might not see that. Some women don't see any cervical mucus. Some women see some degree of, pasty mucus every day. Some women, just don't ovulate. Some women ovulate once every 60 days. And so one of the things I guess, that you wouldn't think that you could use the fertility awareness method for is actually learning a bit about your health. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is when you're not healthy, your menstrual cycle will tell you that. Right. If your cycles are 60 days, that means you're not healthy. And you can tell so much from your cycle. So if your body's healthy, if your hormones are balanced, then your cycles will be within healthy parameters. But if they're not, they won't be. And that's another key piece that's missing in terms of our education, because we're not told anything about our menstrual cycles at all, except that you'll bleed and make sure to wear a pad or something, or a tampon. That's all mm-hmm. we're told, right?
Yeah.
Just don't make mistakes at school.
Yeah. Right.
But the last thing that we're told is that our menstrual cycle health is actually entwined with our health. And so for example, if a woman has a thyroid disorder, if a woman has PCOS, if a woman's experiencing, if a woman is trying to get pregnant and she's not able to, there's so much information that you can get from the menstrual cycle to tell you what's happening with your hormones, that it's incredible.
Yeah, some of that's been new to me because like you said, a lot of people are introduced through Toni Weschler's book, and so she doesn't go really into detail about how that affects, how you can learn about other parts of your health from the fertility awareness method. And so this has been a new thing for me, learning that piece of it. And so I love that you mentioned the kinds of things that we would be able to tell, there could be a hormone imbalance, and we can find that out from our menstrual cycle, or at least get some kind of indication, or maybe a thyroid issue. Are there other kinds of things that we might be able to at least get an inclination that there's an issue with because of a problem with the menstrual cycle?
Well, absolutely. If one of the things that I often, think and talk about on the podcast that I do is that when you chart your cycles, you have access to this information that you otherwise wouldn't have. So one good example of that is a woman could be ovulating regularly, and let's say her cycles are like 30 days or 28 days. And so every month she ovulates, like say she's got regular cycles like clockwork. But if she's not charting her cycles, let's say she's trying to get pregnant and she's not getting pregnant. It's like every month I ovulate, my cycles are, normal length, and what's happening. So if you're charting your cycles, you get to see the different parameters. So, for example, you see if you have cervical mucus. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing. Some women might have lots of it. Some women might not have very much. But in order to get pregnant, you actually have to have sex on the days that you have cervical mucus.
Right.
So sometimes for some couples, it's really a timing thing. Mm-hmm. So isn't it like, it's crazy to think that you could be sent to IVF, but really, let's say your husband or your partner has a job where he, works out, maybe he's out of wherever he works 2 weeks out of the month or whatever.
Right.
He could just miss it every month. So that's something.
Right.
That's pretty significant. But another thing in that same example of your cycles are regular every month and you don't know what's happening, if you're charting your cycles, you'd be able to tell, for example, how long your luteal phase is. And also, because the way it works is that after you ovulate, there's a certain number of days before your period. So you can actually use the fertility awareness to predict your period. Mm-hmm. You can't use it to predict ovulation because ovulation can vary from cycle to cycle. So it doesn't tell you in advance. But after you ovulate, if you're taking your temperature, you can actually tell how many days to the period. So, in some maybe unfortunate cases, you might actually be having an early miscarriage. Mm. And you wouldn't necessarily know. Your period you might just think your period's a couple days late. Right. So I know for myself personally, the first time my husband, I tried to get pregnant, I got pregnant after a couple months and I miscarried, and it was 3 weeks after ovulation. Oh, wow. Yeah. So basically, if I hadn't been charting my cycles, I probably would have just thought that it was like a heavier period.
Right. Yeah. Gosh, that is so interesting. And something that, again, another thing that I just would not have thought about. But you're absolutely right. I can see how that would be a tricky thing for women to catch on to it all. And I think also, too, if a woman doesn't know when she's ovulating, then she may, if she ovulates late, for example, in a cycle later than she's used to, and then is expecting her period to come, though at the same time, and it doesn't come until later, then there may be a time there where she thinks that she might be pregnant because her period seems delayed. But if she knew when she ovulated, then she would know that her period's not late.
Well, that's exactly right. And the problem, too, is that the 28-day thing has been cemented into everyone's mind. So just to get that out of the way. So, although 28 days is about average, a healthy cycle can be anywhere from 25 to 36 days. There's more, and that's from the first day of your menstruation until the day before your next menstruation. So a lot of women will even think, say, for example, that if their cycles are 31 days, days, but they're regularly around, 30, 31 days, that's a problem. But it's not, right? But it's a thing. So you'll see women saying, I have irregular cycles. My cycles are 32 days. And you're like, well, that's actually within the realm of normal. Because there's basically the parameters that I described, like your menstruation and then dry days and cervical mucus. And then the last part of your cycle before, between ovulation and your next period, or if you get pregnant, is the luteal phase or the post-ovulatory phase. So actually what determines if a cycle is healthy or not are those parameters and what they look like, and then the total length if it's about 25 to 36 days. Okay. So there's so much, that's exactly it. There's so much to know about the menstrual cycle, and I think it really comes into play for women when they're trying to get pregnant, because knowing these parameters, knowing what healthy looks like, gives you a starting point. It gives you something to work with, as opposed to, we'll just go keep trying for a year, and if you don't get pregnant, then
right,
call me.
Yeah, and we'll do some invasive something or other. So you mentioned before, or you mentioned several times, charting. Can you give us an idea of what kind of information there is on a chart?
Yes. So the basic information, as I mentioned, cervical fluid is kind of like the central, because I was trained through the Justice method of charting as well. There's different charting methods. There's lots of them. And so, but cervical mucus is central. So basically you observe your mucus every day. And, the way that I observe it is I actually wipe. So, I wipe before I go to the bathroom, after I go to the bathroom as well. You look on the tissue and you see something, or you don't see something, but you record your observations. So you chart your cervical mucus observations daily, and you take your temperature. And an optional sign is to check your cervical position. So I know in Tony Weschler's book, temperature, basal body temperature, cervical mucus, and cervical position. There's different charting methods, and it's interesting because some charting methods are actually mucus only. So some charting methods, you don't even take the BBT, you just check the mucus every day. Okay. The basal body temperature is really helpful to tell you that you've ovulated. So it doesn't predict anything. So nothing happens until you ovulate. So what happens is the basal body temperature is a measure of your resting metabolic rate. And after a woman ovulates, her progesterone shoots up, and that actually changes her metabolism. And so her temperature rises in a measurable way, which is so neat. I think of it like hens sitting on the eggs, waiting for them to hatch.
I love that.
Yeah. So your body's kind of preparing for pregnancy, and so it has to be a little bit warmer to keep the egg at the temperature it needs to be. But what this means for the chart is that, every morning before you get out of bed, you take your temperature and then you record it. And then you kind of start noticing a pattern. So before ovulation, your temperatures are kind of, they're all over the place kind of, but they're within a certain range. And then after you ovulate, they go up. And then they're kind of within a new range. And you can actually draw a line in the middle of the chart, and you'll see like the before ovulation temperatures are lower, and then the after ovulation temperatures are higher. Yeah. So you record that, and then when your temperature goes up, you got to wait, a couple days to confirm that you've ovulated. But then you would look back. So you don't know on the day that you ovulated, but after your temperature goes up, you can say, it looks like I ovulated yesterday, or something like that.
Which again is such a critical piece of information, because I think another misunderstanding out there has been that for those who are taking their temperature, that the increase is going to happen when they are ovulating, but the increase in temperature is actually happening after ovulation occurs, right?
Yeah, and then of course there's a lot of discussion around like a temperature dip. So before a woman ovulates, her pituitary secretes luteinizing hormone, all the bio, and then, that's what triggers your ovary to ovulate. And then, so it's all this hormonal conversation that's going on between your brain and your ovaries. But so, some women may observe like a dip before their temperature goes up, but I think that piece of information causes women to kind of stress over it and like obsess over this dip. So not every woman experiences that. Really and truly with the fertility awareness method, you kind of just have to observe what you see that day. And then if you're confused, you kind of have to just wait until tomorrow and observe what you see tomorrow. Because it's not predicting anything, just like you said, but it's telling you what happened after. The temperature, though, is really helpful. It's really helpful to identify that you have ovulated or that you are ovulating. That is key, because that's something you'll want to know if you're ovulating or not. And then it helps you to pinpoint when it happened approximately. And then it helps you to predict your period as well. And so then if you are trying to get pregnant and you do get pregnant, then, I love that. I love having that accurate, like I know when I ovulated. So I have 2 children now. My eldest son is 3.5 and my baby is 8 months. Yeah. So it's busy around my house. But when I got pregnant, I actually was able to tell exactly like when I, approximately within a day or so, but when I ovulated. And what was it? I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. I was able to I was able to identify when I ovulated, so that was really neat, because then I knew I could, calculate my due date.
Right,
with accuracy. So that was an added bonus. Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Oh.
With my second child, I actually didn't pee on a stick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I knew. Yeah, so what's the point? I've been charting my cycles for 15 years, so I kind of, it's if my luteal phase, if my temperature stays high for longer than that, 12 days, that's typical for me. I already knew, so I just waited until my temperature stayed up, and I was like, honey, we're pregnant.
Nice. Well, I guess,
stick.
there weren't always sticks to pee on, so people had to know some way or another, right?
But I wanted to share that I don't expect anyone, to not pee on a stick. I mean, that's a really special moment. We had that with our first son, pee on a stick. But I guess I'm just saying that, like, that's the power of this method.
Right.
Like, I was pregnant without having to rely on anything other than my thermometer and my chart.
Yeah, which is really cool and so empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in all of this talk about what is and is not normal, and how this can be a good indicator of health or health issues, I just want to share that I personally have had a huge shift in my view of menstruation over the last several years, where it once was something that I dreaded, that I thought was uncomfortable, I thought it was inconvenient, but now I see it as an indicator that my body is functioning well, and it's just a night and day sort of shift. And even when I have those moments where I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to deal with this, and then I go, no, I need to stop, because I'm thankful that my body is doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, I think that's I find that with when women start charting their cycles with fertility awareness, at first it's like I said, it's just this thing that you're doing for a goal. So I'm going to either birth control, natural, hormone free, great, or try to get pregnant. But what happens in the process is that it's hard not to gain an appreciation for your body and how amazing it is, and how complex yet simple it is. And it really helps you to appreciate what's happening and appreciate that feminine energy, that feminine aspect of yourself. And I can totally relate to what you're saying, because when I was first discovering the method, I was also discovering that same appreciation for my menstruation. I mean, we've always been taught that menstrual blood is gross and dirty, and I've come, to this appreciation. And it might sound weird to say, but if you look around, there's no human on this earth that is not here because of menstrual blood, right?
Yeah.
Like that is what sustains life in the womb. So, chew on that for a minute and really think about that, because I don't even understand why our culture makes menstruation into such a gross, dirty thing, because none of us would be here without it.
Absolutely. And it's such a strange thing that there's sort of this shame associated with it as well, and that we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to reveal to anybody else that it's going on, that it is such a bizarre thing when it is such an integral part of our humanity.
Well, and I would go further to say, because since I was only on hormonal contraceptives for a short period of time, it means that I went through my entire 20s, and I'm mid 30. How old am I? 33. So, but basically I went through all those years having cycles. A lot of women did not. So to speak to my experience, menstruation, I mean, the other aspect of it, other than the fact that it's perceived to be dirty and gross, is that you're perceived to be, if you have, say, mood changes around menstruation or before menstruation, you're considered to just be this crazy, whatever person, bitch, whatever.
Yep.
And the interesting thing that I've learned, I feel that menstruation is one of my greatest teachers. Well, that sounds weird, doesn't it? But I don't, but my experience of that is that each menstruation, the few days before, I do tend to feel like more introspective, more irritated at certain things. But the interesting thing is that the things that are irritating me the most around menstruation are usually the things that I need to look at, the things I need to focus on. So if I am unhappy in a job, that is brought to my attention. It's like an alarm bell. If I'm unhappy in a relationship, if something in my life isn't working, it is brought to my attention every month. And that has only been my experience, but that has had a profound impact in my life, because then I can't ignore those things. So I have to make changes. And I wonder where I would be if I didn't have that.
Right, absolutely. Oh gosh, there's such good things to think about here. I'm just really I'm just excited. I'm really excited about all the information that you're giving to the listeners, because this is such good stuff. It's actually a really great segue, I think, into my next question, that because not only do you have a podcast, but you also do fertility awareness coaching. Is that what we call it, coaching?
Yeah, fertility awareness education, or fertility coaching, yeah.
Okay. And so I can imagine you would be a really fantastic person to learn from personally. Can you talk a little bit about that service that you offer?
Well, absolutely, and thank you. So basically what it is so I'm a fertility awareness educator, and so what I do is, I teach the nuts and bolts of fertility awareness. A lot of women learn through books, just like you did, and I think that there are some women that absolutely don't need a teacher, but I think these days they're more rare, and so let me explain that a little bit. So if you're reading Toni Weschler's book or any of the other resources about fertility awareness, you'll see that what a typical healthy cycle looks like. So when a woman has a healthy cycle, and it's very obvious to her when she has mucus and everything kind of falls in line, then she might be thinking to herself, well, why would anyone ever need a teacher? Because in her case, she probably doesn't need any support. Yeah. But the majority of women, unfortunately, don't fall into that category. So it goes beyond just teaching a woman how to chart. So that's a part of it too. With the fertility awareness method, a lot of women have associated that with the rhythm method, which isn't even really a thing, and no one even knows what it is. But I think the rhythm method basically was when people would look at their calendar and be like, okay, this is when I had my period, and so it was not really ever a scientifically based method. Yeah, so a lot of people associate fertility awareness with that, and they believe that fertility awareness is ineffective as a result. So when used correctly, so the Just East method, the method that I'm trained in, it's 99.4% effective. And the reason for that is that if you're only fertile during a certain window of your cycle and you're not engaging in, unprotected sexual intercourse at that point, then you can't get pregnant. And it's actually like a scientific thing. There are scientific studies. It's not just somebody, saying something. Right. And I can send you links to the studies if someone really wants to check them out. But so in order to get that high effectiveness, that's where, because those studies are also based on women who were trained by teachers. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of what I do to help a woman really feel confident in her observations and to be able to actually get a real handle on the method. It's not that it's so complicated. It's just that when you're first starting out, it's like any other skill. It's like riding a bike or learning to drive standard if anyone drives. The first couple cycles are a bit of, to get your head around it. And then once you get going, you're good to go. Mm-hmm. The other part of it is that when your cycles are not falling within the parameters, when you're noticing a bunch of stuff, or maybe you're not noticing. So the issue is that, so let me give myself as an example again. So when I first learned fertility awareness, I was so excited. This was my female empowerment thing. I was so excited that I didn't even know what an unhealthy cycle looked like. So my cycles, I have hypothyroid. And so when I first started charting, my cycles were actually really long. They were like 45 days. Wow. And my temperatures were low. And that was actually how, so I was working, like I mentioned, I learned within a group of women who were teaching. And so, one of the women looked at my chart and was like, you should go get your thyroid checked. And that's how it was diagnosed. And so if you're not working with a teacher, you might be on like my thing where I was like, my cycles are 45 days and that's okay because cycles don't have to be 28 days and I'm my own woman or whatever. Right. But really, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And you could have, there's just so many things about a woman's menstrual cycle. So if your cycles are not falling within the range, if you're having trouble understanding your mucus and those types of things, not only does a teacher like me teach you how to figure it all out, but we can also take a look at your cycle and use it as a tool to kind of identify any health issues. If your cycle's off, it means that there's something else that could be going on. And so that is, both of those things they come together in the work that I do with women.
Lovely. That is so fantastic. I mean, really, what a great resource. And that makes perfect sense to me that, we get educated about something. It doesn't make us an expert on it. And so having somebody who's been through it personally and has also coached other people through it to be even just another pair of eyes on your chart and give you some additional insight, that can't possibly hurt. It can only be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then for women who are trying to get pregnant, it's a whole other conversation because I think that in our culture now, women are just told, go on the pill, right, forever. And then when you're ready to get pregnant, your doctor will even say, you don't need to go off of it very long. You can start trying the minute you come off of it, which is true. You can do whatever you want, but it's a thing that it even though some women are able to get pregnant right away off the pill, that may not even be the best case scenario because the pill depletes certain nutrients. And in a perfect world, in an ideal scenario, you would actually give yourself a few months where you focus on your nutrition, and really try to replenish those nutrients. But the added factor would be to start charting your cycles and see what the parameters are like. Right. See what your cervical mucus is like. See what your luteal phase looks like. A lot of women get off the pill and their luteal phase is really, and that's the second half of your cycle. It has to be 12 or at least 10 days, preferably 12 to 14 days, in order for you to sustain a pregnancy. So there's things going on, and charting your cycle can help you. It gives you a visual, it gives you kind of like a real real-time health survey of how you're doing. And the other interesting part is that when you're making changes in your diet, when you're, improving your sleep habits or whatever you're doing, you can actually see the progression on your charts. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of see like where you started from, and everything was kind of looking a little hairy. But then when you're working with somebody and you're kind of, targeting what you're doing based on what you see on your own chart, then you can actually see the progression. And that can help you to plan your pregnancy, because instead of just having all that frustration, if you give yourself some time, wait till your cycles improve and you start to see the normal parameters, healthy mucus, long enough luteal phase, if you identify something like a thyroid, issue, like if you get all that stuff out of the way and really work on your nutrition, then we can have a different conversation about pregnancy. You can really be intentional about trying to conceive.
Right. And you have an ebook about all of this too, don't you?
I do. I put together a resource to help women, especially coming off the pill, because I think what happens is that since we're told that we're just you're going to go off the pill and then your cycles should just come back and they should be 28 days and it should just be perfect. I think it's really confusing for women when it doesn't happen. And so I put together a resource where at least you can have some information, like, why didn't my period just come back? Yeah. So you can go to fertilityfriday.com/ebook. And I'm sure you'll link to that in your show notes to be connected with that.
Of course. Yeah. So,
and it's free.
Good. That is good to know. It's free and it's great information. So before we wrap up, Lisa, do you have a parting piece of wisdom, anything that you would really like to make sure our listeners hang on to?
I would. I think fertility awareness is not for everyone in terms of using it as a method for birth control. It requires, keeping track of things, and I get it. It's not for everybody. What I would say is that the knowledge around your menstrual cycle is for everybody. So I think there's no right method for everybody, so I'm totally on board. But what I feel strongly that every woman should at least have the opportunity to learn this information. So, if this is all new to you, if you like what you hear, you'll hear tons more on my podcast. And if you liked this episode, then you'll like that as well. Yeah. Because just to delve into each of those topics. So, really just remember that your menstrual cycle health is a reflection of your overall health. Some health professionals will call it the fifth vital sign, meaning that you can use it as a marker of how healthy you are. And so, it's free to track your menstrual cycle, and it can be the most powerful tool in your health and specifically your fertility journey. So that's what I got to say.
That is fantastic. Lisa, I really appreciate you being on the show today. I appreciate you sharing all of this wisdom. I'm certain that this is going to be a huge benefit to our listeners. And listeners, like Lisa said, visit her podcast as well. If you enjoy what we do here, you're definitely going to enjoy what she does over there. Again, Fertility Friday podcast. So much good stuff. So thanks again, Lisa, for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Stephanie. It was a lot of fun.
You got it.